There's something incredibly fitting. This is the last session that I will introduce in this role, and it does include members of the community that are ongoing friends and partners. You're going to meet Vijay Gupta, first violin from the LA Philharmonic and founder of Street Symphony, and also Juilliard pre-college alumni. Thank you very much. And Camille Zamora, so long-time colleague of mine, soprano, Juilliard alumni, founder of Sing for Hope, and someone who has graced this stage more than once, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, about the other interventions that she's done personally. This session will be moderated by the extraordinary Eric Liu, my partner in citizenship work, the co-founder of Citizen University, and with his own Aspen program on citizenship and identity in America, and a force for good, unifying all of the worlds around being a part of your own society and world as a citizen, in the biggest sense of that word. We are joined today by three extraordinary musicians from the Aspen Music Festival and School, Elizabeth Keckeisen, Adam Milstein, and Nathan Walhout. We thank you so much for joining us. This session is going to speak for itself. And you know what else speaks for itself? Extraordinary music. So I'm going to cede the stage to these extraordinary musicians, and they're going to kick it off right now, and then we'll have Eric join us leading a discussion, and then we'll all participate a little bit in the end. So don't get cold. You're going to be used in this way. Okay. Welcome, please.
Yay, thank you. So just a quick word about this piece. This is 400 years old. It was written by a guy who is from an immigrant family. It's in Spanish. It's about being separated from those he loves, but it's about resilience. It's about longing, but it's about hope. And in fact, the first word of the refrain is esperar, hope. Esperar, sentir, morir, by Juan de Hidalgo, 1632.
I'll go home now. Thank you so much for being here this morning. And again, as I get started here, once Camille and Vijay are ready, I'll invite them back up to the stage here to join this conversation. I just want to begin this discussion portion of our conversation with a profound note of gratitude for Damien. Damien Wetzel has been, as many of you know, not just the director of the Aspen Arts Program, but one of the country's, you could say one of the planets, but certainly one of the country's catalytic forces for embodying and popularizing the ideas that we're actually going to talk about here for the next 25 minutes here, and that is the idea of the citizen artist. Actually, I'm not sure I know another human who better embodies the ideal of the citizen artist, and the only thing that can kind of console us about his leaving the Aspen Institute is that he's going to bring his spirit, his way of being, and just your soul, your beautiful soul, to the Juilliard School in ways that will kind of amplify this message and this work even more widely. So can we all just give a round of appreciation to Damien? Come on up here, you guys. Enough of the sappy stuff. Well, you just got a chance to hear a little bit of what Camille Zamora and Vijay Gupta are capable of, but it's really literally only scratching the surface of what they are capable of. And that's not true only in the artistic sense, but also in the civic artistic sense. These are both also extraordinary citizen artists. And because in the spirit of this program, words, actually images can speak more powerfully than words, we have a video, I believe, to cue up to give you a little bit of introduction to the work that both Camille and Vijay do in the world more widely. Can we dim the lights and cue that video?
I think this is the greatest public art project ever.
Every day we look out, there's at least like a family of 4 or 5 people that are all playing. You can tell half of them have never played a piano before.
You know, as soon as someone sits down and plays, everyone stops and gathers around, and you have this sort of immediate, temporary moment of community.
The Sing for Hope pianos transform New York City.
For 3 weeks in the summer, there are these hot spots that are bringing people and communities to life.
People are startled to see this colorful, crazy, beautiful instrument in the middle of a street.
You don't expect a piano to be painted, you don't expect it to be out on the streets, and you'll walk up and you'll see this mini community in New York. Each January, we bring all 88 pianos into our studio.
I've never seen 88 pianos in the same space.
These artists, they're putting their heart and soul into these pianos.
Dreams and nightmares and bird feathers layered on top of layers on top of layers.
Playing with the physical presence of the piano.
You feel the artist's investment in the piece. It's very moving.
There are a lot of walls up between people and the consumption of art. So we're bringing the art to them.
We're making art radically accessible to all.
We break down that barrier, and they can touch it, and they can hear it, and they can experience it in a completely new way.
And after their 2 weeks on the street, these pianos go on to live lives.
They get to be placed in schools and in hospitals, and we send our artists into those spaces, and they do mini performances and mini master classes.
You say, oh, you put a piano in the South Bronx and people are going to destroy it, and that's not the case. This piano has challenged that stereotype because people can appreciate good things. We are worthy of this piano.
First and foremost, music is uplifting.
When you play music, you can find self-worth.
Keeps the soul up high. It's good for you to be able to have that outlet.
It gives me joy, and it lets me know that I can give other people joy.
Art is just an easy way for us to feel connected as humans.
People will gather around it and people will interact.
When you see it, you will stop and you will look at it.
To see all those people come together, people who probably would have never noticed each other walking down the street, was inspiring.
It's about the creative spark that lives in every person. The theme of Sing for Hope is art for all.
It's about connecting people with the creative spirit that's inside all of us.
somebody singing or playing an instrument, it's coming from their soul. It's coming from their heart, and it's reaching out to others.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute honor to welcome you to this third Messiah project.
We are presenting excerpts of Handel's beloved Messiah alongside a series of pieces of music which tell the story of people who experience homelessness and poverty in Los Angeles today. Our goal is to share our stage with the Skid Row community. This is the first year of the launch of the Street Symphony Fellows program. And this year, Ben Shirley is our composer fellow.
Ben is such a special person to have as our first composition fellow because he is both a professional musician and a member of the Skid Row community.
We're going to premiere a brand new piece of Ben's that we have commissioned ourselves called We Need Darkness to See the Stars.
I came down here on drugs and alcohol, and now it's come full circle, and just overwhelming. I've got this wide open, endless music to study and listen to and explore, and it's been my lifesaver. Hopefully, some of the guys at the mission will look and say, if this idiot can do it, I can get my life to be better.
We also have vocalist fellows who are performing this year, Brian Palmer and our mezzo-soprano, Christina Collier.
The people that walk it in darkness.
The piece that I'm singing is The People That Walked in Darkness. For me, this piece is like the Phoenix Rising.
The people that
When I came here 3 years ago, I had a month clean from a heroin addiction. So today I celebrate the resilience of your ever-expanding souls, and I pray that you see the light inside you and give it permission to shine. Homelessness and drug addiction are just conditions. They're not really who we are.
This is huge. Like, I've never done anything like this before.
I am a Skid Row resident. Never in a million years did I think that I would be singing along with members of the LA Phil and the Master Chorale.
Actually, before we begin our conversation, I actually just want to invite you to turn to somebody near you and just look at them for a moment, because that was partly buying time for me to just stop sobbing. But also because there was a word we heard. I hadn't seen the videos before we ran this, and there was a word that appeared 3 or 4 times there: souls. And just to see each other's souls for a minute, and to be in this room together and to realize we are present here, and we are enough for what is needed. And Camille and I were driving over here together, and just feeling like with a lot of what's the turmoil in our national politics right now, the news even of recent hours in the last day, there's just a lot of heaviness in a lot of people's hearts, and just so grateful to both of you for the work you do and the ways that you do it. I want to actually start with this idea of the citizen artist. Both Vijay and Camille are recent Citizen Artist Fellows of the Kennedy Center, which is itself relatively recent program that great institution has kicked off around the country. And so you, more than most, have actually thought about what that term means, right? But I'm curious for folks here who've maybe been hearing me and Damien use this language, or Yo-Yo Ma in past years on the stage, what does it actually mean to you? What is a citizen artist? Start with you, Camille.
You know, I guess I would maybe start by saying there's nothing new under the sun. This is not new. In fact, this is the oldest of the old. This is returning art to the role of us around the campfire, I think, in a lot of ways, which is to say, you know, something that addresses soul and very directly without, you know, without any barriers to entry. I sometimes use the phrase radical welcome. So citizen artistry is about art for all, and it's about using art's power to transform institutions, individuals, our world.
And that's so palpable in just what we saw from the work of Sing for Hope and the Pianos Project, but even more broadly, just the way that you carry yourself in this work. There's a spirit of radical welcome, in a sense that anybody can own this spirit, right?
You know, I have to say, I'm so deeply grateful for the thought leaders in this space and for this literal space to share these ideas, because I have to say, for me, since I was 2 years old, all I wanted to do was sing. But I also had these enormous questions about, you know, what does it mean to lock yourself in a practice room and focus for 8 hours on an F sharp when the world is falling around you? You know, I mean, it could feel very kind of insular. And so I personally am just so grateful for this kind of work, because I think all of us who are drawn to the arts, we're drawn because we believe in truth and light, and we want that raw, immediate connection. And I know of no better way to deliver it than through this work. And then I do feel lucky because it dovetails back into my traditional concert hall life in really empowering ways.
I'll come back in a little while to the idea of being locked in a room with an F sharp for 8 hours. But Vijay, for you, how do you define the idea of the citizen artist?
In my mind, it's the role of the artist to be a bridge. We are a cultural broker. We are a communicator across spaces. I spend most of my mornings and evenings on stage at Walt Disney Concert Hall with the LA Philharmonic. But most of my afternoons I am in Skid Row or in one of the 5 LA County jails. And for me, that, you know, being stuck in LA traffic, that drive back and forth between these places, that's exactly the work of the citizen artist. Because it's our job to be that translator and communicator. But the other word that I think about is power. Right? And one thing that we've been very lucky to learn from you, Eric, is these sort of principles around power that, yes, power accumulates at the top, and yes, power justifies itself, and power is infinite. And so the thing that we are focusing on in the work of Street Symphony is also, how do we give away and share our power? Because our job in the very beginning was in this mode of outreach, where we literally sat on the stage and we would play for mostly poor people of color living in Skid Row, and we'd say, this is great music, you should love it. And then we would hear, you would have audience members raise their hands, and we would, you know, we classical musicians would go, whoa, 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 I did not sign up for human contact, right? And instead, our audiences would ask us stories about why we love this music and what were the stories of these composers. And, you know, the Messiah Project is an idea that actually emerged from a member of the Skid Row community. When we actually let ourselves step out of the center and give away our power, we welcome in not only vibrancy and the incredible resilience, but we're also creating a pathway from arts engagement to civic engagement. Because the other thing I just want to put a button on this is with the 3 members of the Skid Row community who you saw in this video, Ben Shirley. I actually just was lucky enough to offer Ben a job in Street Symphony last week, so we literally have hired him to be our new composer fellow. So we actually want to create pathways to hire formally and currently homeless and incarcerated people. But also, Brian and Christina have gone on to be supported and ask for support in the community that they helped create. Right? So in a sense, it's also our job to hold the container and be the witness to the power of what people can step into when they're given that chance.
You know, thank you for naming that, because I think one of the things that is very distinctive about the work that both of you do, a lot of people might think, just hearing the phrase citizen artist, that it just means bringing the art to more citizens and exposing more people to that. And of course that is a part of it, right? But what is indeed radical and yet timeless about what you do is that you're actually inviting the, quote, audience into actual participation, right? which is powerful in itself, but is also deeply metaphorical for what you're trying to do in civic life. That we are not spectators, we are not audience, we are all creators, we are all participants, right? Not all of us have had the chance to be at the level of craft and skill that you have, but we are all participants in this way, right? And that is, the beauty, literally, metaphorically, of the Pianos project and of your work generally, and the ways in which Street Symphony has unfolded is about that kind of participation. But I want to now return to this other idea of being locked in a room, and you're joking, Vijay, but I didn't sign up for human contact, right? Damien and I were talking a lot yesterday because as he heads to the Juilliard School, as you both know, is the tippity top of the tippity top of the tippity top of a whole bunch of pyramids of winnowed talent, right? From around the world. And the way you got to the top of those various pyramids was about locking yourself in the room, being single-minded, and being just completely dedicated to the music in ways that can put yourself in a bit of a bubble, right? Where human contact is a rude awakening in a way. So with your peers and your colleagues who are artists of equal caliber to you, right? Who've gotten to where they've gotten because they worked as hard as you did, how do you convince other artists, particularly younger career artists who are still climbing that pyramid, that this is not only okay, it's actually a necessary part of what it means to be an artist, and it won't be a zero-sum thing where you kind of sacrifice career to be a citizen. I'm sure you both get into these kinds of conversations. How do you sell folks in your worlds on this idea?
I have to say, I was at Juilliard from 2000 to 2004, and definitely, the mindset was we were going to be in our cocoon, and then we would, emerge triumphant from this chrysalis, and the world would pelt us with flowers, and we'd tour around, and, that was how that was going to work. And I was lucky in that I was one of the folks who got management as I came out, but the truth is, kind of the hidden secret was that a lot of our very staid arts institutions, New York City Opera being a key one for my industry, were in a lot of trouble, and the trajectory was not upward. And so, I think that in itself, already some of us were sort of smelling this and thinking, okay, is it about starting to reframe the value proposition? Because really, where do we belong? Where's the income stream? Where can we deliver value maybe in unexpected places? I was also at Juilliard on September 11th, and like a lot of people, that was just a bizarre life moment. And I literally remember that day, there was a group of us saying, what on earth can we do? Juilliard shares a city block with a firehouse that was among the first responders that day, and they lost 11 guys. And we, about 24 hours later, we went, and if those of you who are in New York, you remember people were still hanging up all of the Xeroxed missing sheets, and we went over there, and there were all the missing faces of those fire guys and their families waiting, and we asked if we could sing, and we sang a few songs, and it was transformative for us, and these big guys began to cry, and you could sort of see it unlocked something for them, and it connected me for the first time in my entire musical education to the fact that we actually could provide a solution. And I think that was sort of the beginning of the conversations. I was lucky enough to have a dear best friend at Juilliard in this sort of thinking, Monica Eunice, fellow soprano, and after that event, we really went back and said, there should be ligaments, there should be connections for artists who want to go share their art in a hospital, who want to go put their art in the street. There should be a way for us in the professional arts community to connect in that way.
Thank you for that. Vijay, how do you?
So I resonate so deeply with what you're saying, Camille, and I also want to add this, that it's an immense privilege to have the opportunity to play on stage with a great orchestra. It's an immense privilege to be able to study at a place like Juilliard. Being here at Aspen has brought up like a ton of memories for me, because the last time I was here was 1997, and I was 9. And I was one of those kids who spent 10 hours, in the room practicing for my lessons. And it's the first summer I ever played Tristan with James Conlon, and I was 9, and that wasn't appropriate for a 9-year-old to be playing Tristan. But it is as much our job as artists to heal and inspire as it is to disrupt and provoke. And part of our training in elite institutions, part of the presentation of art in elite institutions has been focused around the consumption of a very elite, winnowed art form, right? Whereas the truth is, Messiah
was composed in 1741 to release 142 men from debtor's prison. Vivaldi's Venue was an orphanage for girls. The Bach St. Matthew Passion would be called a sing-along concert today because every single person in the audience knew those chorales and they sang along, right? So it's up to us to actually undo our own commodification and understand that as artists, and specifically as young artists, that we have a lot more to say than to just be great. But at the same time, I want to bring it back to the point that you made earlier, is that the privilege of that focus and the privilege of that hard work is a kind of currency, right? We have to work hard, right? We have to get to that stage. And then it's for us to also be in touch with the rest of the world around us to realize that this is a platform, again, of power, right? And how do we circulate and recirculate that power? And the last button I'll put on this is to say, I'm often approached by musicians who say, homelessness is such a huge problem, incarceration is such a huge problem. What can I do about white supremacy? What can I do about toxic patriarchy? That's not my job. And that's the thing where we come back to, no, we have to engage. And we have to find our own voices and maybe fail a couple of times in doing that. And so at Street Symphony, we've performed almost 500 events. But each time is this kind of pilot where we've created this iterative process of coming back and talking within ourselves as a community around what we're doing.
You know, this idea, I think it's really important to pick up on. It's not my job, right? The corollary to that, a friend of ours who is involved in something that we run at Citizen University called the Civic Collaboratory, which is basically a national mutual aid network of civic innovators from the arts, but from the veterans world, from the immigrant rights world, from the voting reform world, from the business community, from tech, all of whom are interested in these ligaments of the body politic, right? The ways in which the different aspects and dimensions of the impulse to create a better world, to serve, to be, get expressed in different ways. They will get expressed in the arts world in a way very differently from the way they'll get expressed in the civic tech world, right? And it's not your job necessarily to be a master of all those worlds and the ways in which the ligaments connect to all those other parts of the body politic, but it is your job to know that you are connected to them, right? And our friend F. Willis Johnson, who was a pastor at a church in Ferguson, Missouri, a church that turned out to be a block from the police station, which ended up being this focal point for a lot of the uprising and upheaval that followed the killing of Michael Brown there. He has a book, and he has a saying that he always talks about, which is, hold up your corner. On that day, he could not solve Ferguson, much less solve police violence in the United States, but he could hold up his corner. And on that corner, he held space. He stood out like an artist, like a performer, and he held space. He's not a big guy, right? But he stood and he waded right into the middle of some of those boiling conflicts that were about to get violent there. That idea of all of us holding up our corner is so vividly on display in the work that both of you do. I'm wondering, as you've been doing this work now, right? Because, for you, 9/11 was an epiphany, right? For you, Vijay, I'm not sure how, it may not go back that far, but it's been, more recent. How has your artistic practice changed as a result of your inhabiting more fully this idea of being the citizen artist?
I would just say it is the honor of my life. I mean, I love that you keep coming back to that. It's such a privilege, and it's a through line now that, I still have plenty of cognitive dissonance in my daily goings on, but there is this sense that I am using my art as a delivery system for hope. And I think, Eric, to come back to something you mentioned initially, that how much the word soul came up in these videos, I think we are going to be hard pressed to really address the education crisis in this country, to really address our lack of social cohesion, our defunct healthcare system, if we don't address the soul. And I know that is just very sort of unscientific and wrong to sort of mention that, but the truth is, whatever you want to call it, collective unconscious or God or whatever, we have to address it. And this is art's currency. I love the fact that the Latin root spiritum is the core of both respiration, my instrument, all of our instrument really, and inspiration. So when we breathe together, when we hear a work of art together, and we sing together, and we paint together, what happens, whether or not we realize, is that we start to breathe. I actually noticed at the beginning when Eric said, look to your neighbor, there was an audible in this room. So I think, if we don't go on that level, it's going to be very tough for us to address these challenges. So I think, again, the opportunity to see the arts as a solution to our crises. This is a new idea. It wasn't what was mentioned when I was in art school, but that's sort of the joy and the discovery of my life, and the fact that the arts are increasingly being invited to the table, thanks to people like Damien and thanks to the Aspen Institute, the inclusion of arts in policy-making gatherings. This is new. It's not an accident that the arts have been cut out of schools. It's because we weren't at the table there for a couple decades. So we're elbowing our way back in, and I think what's so amazing about Street Symphony is you're doing it literally on the streets. That's what the pianos do. 450 times over, we have placed these pianos in the middle of, everywhere from Coney Island to the Bronx Grand Concourse and said, this is yours. You are a creator. You have a creative spark. Everyone does. Excavate that. And I think that really is the beginning of a lot of healing for us.
Vijay, for you and your practice, how's it changed?
So, I actually want to approach this from almost like a technical, musical angle about what has changed in the way that I actually play my instrument myself, which is that, we as young musicians are fed a kind of myth that either you're going to become Yo-Yo Ma or you'll be nothing. And this is a cause of immense trauma for us. That we have to either become soloists, and to join a great orchestra like the LA Phil is already you've kind of already failed, right? And those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach do outreach, right? And so we kind of build this kind of stigma of hierarchy around how we approach being an artist. And I think what this work has actually allowed me to do in my own playing, quite simply, is breathe and relax. Where I've actually started to realize I don't have to do this alone. I don't have to be perfect. I was recently invited to give the opening keynote for the League of American Orchestras conference in Chicago last week, and Yo-Yo gave the talk there. And he said the first time he actually questioned why he played the cello was when he was 49 years old. Right? Because we've been imbued with this idea of perfection as this brittle standard that often belongs to somebody else, right? So this work has immensely humbled me as a musician because, we have a mentor named Liz Lerman who did this work about 30 years ago with dance. And she wrote an incredible book called Hiking the Horizontal. And she takes that stigma of hierarchy and lays it on its side, lays it on the horizontal. And what emerges from that place is an equanimity of excellence, right? Who are we to say that our excellence should be more worthy than the excellence of someone like Brian or Christina who are recovering from homelessness and addiction? Right? Why aren't their voices as central to the table? What do we have to learn from them? So we've created this kind of exchange. And we'll come back to this in a story later on, but we actually took a Schumann string quartet into Twin Towers Jail in downtown LA, which is effectively the largest psychiatric institution on the planet. Our de facto treatment of mental illness in the United States is incarceration. And we were playing a piece by a man who we would probably diagnose as having schizoaffective disorder. And an inmate in the jail said, man, Schumann died in a place like this. And it hadn't even clicked in our mind, and so in that moment, it completely changed the way we played in the jail. And then the next week, when my quartet played that piece on stage at Disney Hall, I gave the introduction to the audience at Disney Hall, saying this story.
So that they could hear it in a completely different way.
Absolutely, and we played it in a different way. And we weren't shaking with nervousness because we were carrying the story of those 80 men we played for in Twin Towers Jail with us to the stage. So this is coming back to our role as citizen artists.
So beautiful what you're saying, and this idea both of humility and this hierarchy of stigma is applicable not only to musicians who are products of elite institutions, right? It's actually to other people who are products of elite institutions, but it's also applicable to, P.S., every other human, right? This way in which we create this sense of hierarchy of meaning, purpose, and in the negative sense, a word that you both use, currency, worth, value, right? And one of the things that strikes me, a word that you just said also, Vijay, there's this idea of exchange, right? This kind of permeability, this osmosis. When you see something unfold like the Messiah performance there, right? And I actually want to pivot now to a different, in this spirit of exchange, we've been talking about the idea of citizen artist as citizen, right? And we have two incredible artists who embody that. But I think it's also important to remember that that term encapsulates the other direction as well, which is citizen as artist, right? So I don't know how many, maybe not, how many of you in this room are trained artists or musicians or performers? Okay, so less than half of you, right? Which means the other half of you might be thinking of yourself, wow, it's amazing to hear these inspiring artists, but what does this have to do with me? I'm not an artist. Like, okay, maybe I'm an audience member, so now I'll listen differently next time I hear the Schumann, but no, right? This other direction of citizens as artists, the work of citizenship itself being art, right? The work of actually showing up in community, looking a neighbor or a stranger in the eye, seeing pain and addressing it, feeling a vibe of anger or hope emerging in a community and deciding you got to do something with that and harness it or be part of it. That's artistry. That is creation, right? And I'm wondering for both of you in that dimension now, put down your instrument, rest that part of your professional instrument for a moment, just in your civic lives, okay? As a resident of New York, as a resident of LA, what's changed for you in the way that you see citizenship as art, in the way that you see the everyday work of building community, participating in politics, challenging inequities and injustices and rigged games of different ways? What's changed for you in that part of your lives?
I think I would just say, yay, dopamine effects of art. I think there is a, listen, I mean, I think all of our nerves are a little shot right now from our national dialogue or lack thereof. And I know that for me, civic engagement sometimes when I'm looking at my Facebook feed can just feel like, terrifying and very dark. And to me, I do think there's a natural kind of optimism that I have trained through this work that permeates all aspects of my life. And I think, again, that whole thing of art as a delivery system for hope, it enacts on a cellular level these kinds of changes that have to do with oxytocin and the release of connective energy. And I think that informs my life. It informs the fact that when I go get my bagel, I feel more connected to the guy who's giving it to me. And I think, the other thing that's interesting is just the nuts and bolts of these programs. They really do point once again to what is so good in people. One of the two top questions we always get about the Sing for Hope pianos are, first of all, what happens when it rains? So the answer to that is we have this huge buddy system that's beautifully automated, and all of these passionate people checking their little data and seeing that the rain is coming, and they go, and every piano has its own raincoat, and they go and cover the pianos. So the whole thing about the Pianos Project is it's actually a year-round continuum of art for all. The pianos, every one of the 50 2018 Sing Pro pianos will go to a partner New York City public school, and every one this year survived in good health. And that is because of this huge community. The second question we get is, don't people hurt the pianos? Of 450 pianos that we have placed since 2010, 3 have been vandalized. So that is a tiny, I'm not good at math, but that's a sliver of a percentage. Someone out there can tell me what nano percentage that is. And the point is, it shows you what Lee said so beautifully in the Bronx, which is, if you believe in us, we believe in ourselves, and we will outperform anything that you can imagine. So I think, again, that act of believing in someone gives them a voice, and that in itself brings this whole joy mode, for lack of any.
But that buddy system itself is such an incredible metaphor for citizenship, for what it is that has been evaporating in civic life over the course of most of our lifetimes, right? The clubs, the associations, the mutual agreements to, hey, when something goes down on our block, whether it's precipitation or bad human interactions, my job is to get the raincoat on that, or my job is to put some protective coating on that situation, and that's a habit that is itself permeable across both dimensions of your life, right, and habits. So, Vijay, for you.
Well, this idea of relationship comes to mind. We've been also tossing around this word radical, and often radical gets described as something extraneous, but radical literally means to grasp something by the root, right? And I think at the root of democracy, at the root of artistry, at the root of citizenship is this idea of mutuality. Like, who are you? Who are you? and I see you, right? The greeting in many indigenous cultures is simply, I see you, right? And so what is it that we need to remove in order to be seen? And the question that we're asking now at Street Symphony and for us as individual artists is that, look, as musicians, we get to leave, right? We do something beautiful on the surface for the Skid Row community, but we get to go back home. We get to go back to Disney Hall, right? So who then do we talk to on the other side? So if we have an experience with the Skid Row community, does that mean that we can also have experiences with funders? Right? The other thing that's in this Messiah project is that we have all of our funders from all over LA, including all the swanky places that you know and love in Los Angeles, who make the pilgrimage to Skid Row to come and be witness. So when they sing the Messiah sing-along, they're as vulnerable in the audience as someone sitting next to them who actually may have experienced homelessness but is more prepared because they've come to our workshops. Right? So there's this side. And then the last part of this question is a further extension is, well, what next? How do we show up to the Skid Row community without the excuse of just playing a concert for them? How do we show up on their terms in things they care about? And so the dream for us is to create this arts hub space in relationship with other organizations so that we can actually craft a partnership and a network for people who are currently homeless to come off the streets, go through our arts programs, and then have housing, and then be able to vote in their own neighborhood. And then have their own physical address. So that's the thing that we're going for.
Okay, I'm so I want to blow up the Aspen Ideas Festival schedule so that we can have 2 more hours with you guys, but we don't have that, and we are going to pivot back to some music here. But what I want to do before saying that is just to recenter us in everything both of you have been saying. Part of what we've been creating here together through this whole 50-minute gathering here is a ritual, right? We didn't just walk in. Some of you came in while the rehearsal was still going on, and you sensed, did it start early? What's going on here, right? And then Damien said, oh, you got a preview, right? And that kind of resets you, and it resets you for a ritual, right? That there's a ritual of performance, there's a ritual of democracy, right? That there's a theatrical way in which we see each other, engage each other, and the rest. And our work together as citizen artists in both senses is to be mindful of the fact that these kinds of rituals of humanizing each other, of activating hope, of really making these connections are not just things that happen on stage in moments like this. They are rituals that happen at the bagel store. They're rituals that happen at the homeless shelter. They're rituals that happen, in the subway, whatever it might be, right? And if at all times we can be as mindful as these 2 beautiful humans are of our power as citizen artists, then I actually am net quite hopeful about the health of the body politic. Please join me in thanking Vijay Gupta and Camille Zamora for this.
Now for performance.
Schumann. Now you're going to hear Schumann. And then after that, we have a little encore that'll involve you. So please enjoy.
Elizabeth, Nathan, Adam, give them a round of applause.
We're going to indulge, and it's perfect. We're going to throw the doors open wide in the spirit of what we've been talking about. And anybody who joins, and we hope they will. But we thought we'd tune you guys a little bit so that we can all join together in a song of hope.
Yes.
All right? I'm going to let Vijay and Camille do the honors on we're doing C and G.
So guys, the first thing we're going to do is just take a breath. So everybody put your hands on your belly. Oh, that feels good. Another big breath. And let it go. And on this third one, we're going to put sound on the exhale. One more time. Okay, let's have that interval, that opening interval, and we're going to just do it on ah, and let's just play this back.
Would you like us to stand up?
I love that. Let's stand.
All right.
Okay, guys, so find a pitch somewhere in there. Let's just all do it together. Just warm up. We're going to do one verse of America the Beautiful.
And just for context, 5 years ago on this stage, Camille joined with Arthur Bloom, the composer and founder of Music Corps, Sergeant Tim Donnelly, a wounded warrior, young man who found his voice after being injured in Afghanistan, and Yo-Yo Ma on this stage. Music Corps has gone on with the support of some of the people in this room who were here that day, Rita and Bob, to open new ground around the country. And in tribute to that, and in tribute to the ideal that we hope for, artist as citizen, citizen and artist, will do America. All right?